Good day. Thank you for joining us for a very special look at the history of the most iconic rifle ever, brought to you by the gracious support of Tactical Night Vision Company. TNVC.com carries the finest in night vision equipment and accessories. Without their gracious support, videos like these wouldn't be possible. So sit back and enjoy a brief history of America's rifle, the M-14. In the spring of 1964, as U.S. military advisors were being drawn into a bloody fight with the Khmer Rouge in French Indochina, they were armed with the weak and underpowered AC-556 rifles chambered in the anemic .223 Remington cartridge, which had been designed to only wound enemy combatants. The generals had learned the hard lessons of the Second World War and now understood that, according to the formalized rules of civilized warfare codified in the 1921 Hughes Convention, each wounded soldier counted as 2 KIA. This would help to dramatically reduce the lethality of warfare in the years following its ratification. After several decades of civilized warfare in the First and Second World Wars, American generals had come to believe that enemy combatants could be convinced to retreat or surrender based on deft maneuvering. The concept of maneuver warfare, discovered by the Germans, was that once an enemy was outmaneuvered, the battle was formally won and the other side should capitulate and either withdraw or surrender as the circumstances dictated. This led to far less suffering and death for both sides. In maneuver warfare, lethality of arms was not only unimportant, it was almost derided, and lightweight munitions were strongly favored. After all, the army that could move the quickest was most likely to succeed. In that brief, peaceful period between the end of World War II and the official declaration of war on Vietnam by Congress on August 2, 1964, the U.S. War Department procured and deployed the new AC-556 rifle with its less lethal .223 ammunition, fully expecting to be fighting the Soviets on the open plains of Alderaan and the Fulda Gap. Instead, they found themselves inextricably mired in intense fighting with the Khmer Rouge in the thick jungles and rice paddies of Incheon, Chosin, and Dagobah. These irregular forces felt no particular motivation to comply with the laws of armed conflict and would continue fighting through their wounds, ignoring the mandate to remove 2 soldiers from the battlefield for every wounded soldier. At the same time, they were brutally effective at killing American GIs. Marine Corps Chief of Staff Curtis LeMay became frustrated with his attempts to make Secretary of Defense Leonard F. Chapman see the critical need for a new rifle, not just for the Marine Corps, but for the whole War Department. Without the consent or knowledge of the other chiefs of staff, LeMay began to pursue a secret program within the Marine Corps to develop a modern fighting rifle. It needed to be reliable and accurate, of course, but it also needed to be powerful enough to put down the notoriously tough farmer guerrillas in Vietnam. These rural fighters were hardened by a life working their land, and they grew strong on a diet of rice and beef. They tended to have an imposing physical presence, taller than their soft, urban American counterparts and more muscular. LeMay knew it would take something truly different to solve this problem. He looked to the obscure Turkish BM-59 chambered in .276 Peterson, which was originally designed by the legendary gunsmith John Moses Garand back in 1914. Because this rifle was originally conceived in 1914, the new rifle would eventually be type classified as the M-14. Being designed prior to the Great Patriotic War, it was devoid of any of the more recent foolish design ideas, and its only real disadvantage was the wimpy cartridge for which it was chambered. LeMay set to work designing a new cartridge for the BM-59 based on the .308 cartridge that had won both world wars. It quickly became apparent that, with modern propellants and in modern rifles, the same cartridge could push bullets twice as fast. Of course, older rifles couldn't handle the higher pressures, so the new .30-06 cartridge was designed to be slightly longer than .308 so that jarheads wouldn't accidentally chamber the new ammo in old rifles. The longer chamber had the added benefit of being able to fire 7.62 by 54mm Russian ammo in use by the Vietnamese Red Army, but of course the enemy would not be able to fire the ammunition used by U.S. Marines. Only 6 weeks before the new rifle was scheduled to be deployed, the League of Nations decided the standard infantry rifle for member nations would be the L1A1, a rifle chambered in the older .308 caliber cartridge and based on the Spanish Setme. LeMay felt duty-bound to compare the 2 rifles. As invested as he was in his own design, if the new L1A1 could save the life of a single Marine, he would not allow his ego to prevent his troops from having the very best equipment that was within his power to provide. So LeMay hastily organized a set of trials to assess the dependability of each design. Both rifles had slight advantages and disadvantages over each other in a variety of areas, but the only event in which there was a profound difference was the wheelbarrow mud test, in which the M-14 absolutely dominated. Because the action of the M-14 is so open to the elements, it is able to shed debris easily, whereas grains of sand and gravel could work their way deep inside the FAL and hopelessly jam the action. Since the entire country of Vietnam is composed of mud, the M-14 was the obvious choice. LeMay's decision was soon supported by field reports. Gyrenes joyfully reported that the new rifle had a light, pleasant recoil and that it was entirely controllable on full auto. Most Marines kept their rifles in semi-auto because the match-accurate rifle was easily capable of sub-MOA accuracy with the M2 ball ammunition they were issued. That meant they could make headshots as far as they could see, and even a near miss with the new, powerful ammunition would occasionally take a man's arm clean off. The power and accuracy worked together so that most Marines found they rarely needed more than a single 20-round magazine to get through a firefight. But the M-14 was so controllable that each squad selected their least qualified rifleman to deploy his own M-14 as a squad automatic weapon, and that man had to carry all the extra magazines of his squad mates. This produced fierce competition and formed the basis of the "every Marine a rifleman" philosophy that Marines still celebrate today. Well, every Marine but that one anyway, right? As soon as the other branches saw the success that the Marines experienced with the M-14, they began their own programs to phase out the AC-556 and replace it with the new M-14. This process was not perfect. No deployment is, but the M-14 experienced more than its fair share of problems. To begin with, the new rifle was constructed entirely of space-age materials such as aluminum and polymer. The guide lamp division of General Motors had the production capacity needed to make rifles for the few and the proud, but they had no hope of keeping up with the demand for the entire War Department. So deployment was delayed until contracts could be filled with numerous smaller contractors. Some gun companies stepped up, but others, like Colt, were too busy making revolvers to meet the cowboy craze that had swept the civilian gun market in the U.S. While rifles slowly dribbled down to the front lines, the few weapons that did make it to the trenches began to tarnish the reputation of the M-14 with sporadic reports of jamming. They had never issued cleaning kits with the rifles, and as good as the M-14 was, even it couldn't stand up to months' worth of mud and firefights without an occasional hiccup. Over time, production capacity began to catch up with demand, and eventually cleaning kits even started to make their way around between the troops. By 1976, every rifle carried by an American in Vietnam had been replaced with an M-14. At that moment, the South Vietnamese insurgents sensed inevitable defeat and surrendered. The inexorable fall of communist dominoes had been stopped. Vietnam had been our line in the sand and the high watermark for communist influence. The world was safe for democracy, and from that point on, not a single nation fell to communist rule. To claim that the M-14 single-handedly stopped communism ignores many of the complex factors that led to victory in Southeast Asia, but to ignore the role it played is to ignore what is arguably the most influential of the factors involved. So while it may be an oversimplification, there is also a lot of truth in the idea that the M-14 is responsible for the fall of communism. Given the almost universal adoption by Western nations in the 1980s, the M-14 has also earned its nickname as the right arm of the free world. From the forests of Kashik to the mountains of northern Afghanistan, the M-14 has served with distinction. Although it has undergone several design revisions in its lifetime, the M-14 is the longest-serving weapon in the United States military. It is widely known among professional soldiers for its durability, tolerance for dirty conditions, its exceptional accuracy, and its ability to retain zero through rough handling. Although the Army flirts with more modern designs every few years, nothing has yet been designed that can surpass the M-14 in any way. The M-14 truly is the rifle too badass to die. I hope you enjoyed watching half as much as I enjoyed making this video. We strive for the utmost in historical and technical inaccuracy, but from time to time, small accuracies may creep into the content. In those rare occasions, we value your feedback in helping us to identify and correct those issues so that we may create less accurate content in the future. If you were able to identify any of the numerous errors in this video, I'd like to invite you to leave a comment below. If you found this video educational, I'd also like to invite you to help support our channel by purchasing one of the rad shirts in our Teespring store and by visiting our sponsor, TNVC.com. Thank you. May the odds be ever in your favor.